Imagine handing over your actual credit card to an entity you literally can't see.
Right.
And you tell it to like book you a table at a really crowded restaurant, and then you just walk away.
Just completely hand over control.
Exactly. Not just asking it to find a phone number or pulling up a website for you to look at, but actually executing the entire transaction on your behalf.
Yeah, that sounds like a sci-fi movie pitch, honestly.
It totally does. But last week at TED 2025, Chris Anderson did exactly that, live on stage with an AI.
Which is just wild to think about. It completely reframes our entire relationship with software.
It really does. And welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at the live transcripts of Anderson's interview with OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. And, that moment with the credit card really highlights our mission today.
Wait.
We are unpacking how artificial intelligence is transitioning from this, conversational party trick into autonomous agents operating out in the wild.
Yeah, because we aren't just recapping a tech keynote here.
Definitely not.
The goal of this deep dive is to bridge the gap for you, the listener. To connect those theoretical AI fears we all debate at dinner parties with the very practical reality of what is about to hit your laptop and your workplace in the coming months.
Because the shift we are witnessing right now, it's the difference between talking about the future and being forced to actively deal with the present. The capabilities, they aren't locked in some research lab anymore.
Right, they're being deployed into the real world at just an unprecedented speed.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with where the technology actually sits right now.
Yeah, let's set the stage.
So Anderson asked OpenAI's video generator, Sora, to imagine the TED stage itself. And Altman gave the result a B+.
The B+, yeah.
Which is funny, but he specifically pointed out that the AI successfully rendered 5 fingers on all hands.
Which used to be the ultimate AI struggle.
Right. Wait, getting 5 fingers right on a video gets a B+? I mean, that seems like a remarkably low bar for a company that is actively trying to build superintelligence. Why is that specific anatomical detail actually such a big deal?
I know, it sounds great. Especially considering, just a year or two ago, AI video was just this nightmare of melting faces and
7-fingered hands morphing into each other.
Exactly. But those grotesque hands, they weren't just a funny visual glitch. They were a symptom of how early diffusion models worked.
Okay.
They were essentially just predicting pixel patterns based on 2D images. They had absolutely no underlying understanding of human anatomy or 3D space.
So it's just copying shapes it had seen without knowing what a hand actually is.
Precisely. So when Sora generates 5 distinct, stable fingers in motion now, it demonstrates this massive leap in its latent space mapping.
Meaning what exactly?
It means the model has developed an internal physics engine. It actually understands the structural skeleton of a hand moving through space, rather than just, guessing what a hand looks like frame by frame.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's moving from just mimicking an image to genuinely understanding a physical concept. And I think that was super clear with the next test they did. Because Anderson asked the model to generate a diagram showing the difference between intelligence and consciousness.
Right, which is not an easy prompt.
No, it's a massive philosophical debate.
What's fascinating here is the mechanism behind that generation. Because the AI produced this profoundly simple, really striking visual representation of a massive abstract concept.
And a standard image generator can't just do that.
No, absolutely not. It simply cannot do that on its own. It happened because Sora is now directly tapped into the core reasoning engine of the GPT-4o model.
Ah, so they're talking to each other.
Exactly. We are seeing multimodal synthesis. The text model does the really heavy abstract reasoning to define what consciousness versus intelligence actually means.
Right.
And then the video model translates that native understanding into a visual format. It is literally a bridge between complex thought and visual output.
Man, to power that kind of synthesis at the scale they are operating at, it's hard to even wrap your head around. Because Altman dropped a staggering metric during this interview.
Yeah, the user numbers.
500 million weekly active users.
500 million people.
Every week.
500 million. And hitting that isn't just a business win. It is a massive infrastructural nightmare. I mean, Altman mentioned he spends his entire day just calling people, begging them for their compute power, just trying to keep the systems running.
Because the constraint right now isn't algorithmic creativity. It's sheer silicon.
Right.
They are bound by the physical limits of the global supply chain just to process the underlying math. Every single time someone asks a frontier model to synthesize an image or write a Python script.
Or analyze a spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly. It burns immense compute. Multiply that mathematical burden by 500 million people every single week. The infrastructure strain is completely unprecedented in the history of computing.
The analogy that comes to my mind, it's like they're trying to build and fuel a rocket ship while it's already hurtling through the upper atmosphere. That is a perfect way to put it.
Because they are stilling the user base and the physical data centers simultaneously, all while the models themselves keep getting larger
Right.
and demanding more resources.
Yeah, and because this rocket ship is moving so incredibly fast, it is inevitably colliding directly with human jobs, human creativity, and the very foundation of intellectual property.
Which is a huge friction point right now.
The scale of adoption is forcing these issues into the spotlight immediately. You can't ignore it anymore.
And we saw a perfect example of that creative collision right on the TED stage, because Anderson put up an AI-generated image of Charlie Brown having an existential crisis about being an AI.
Right.
And visually, it was a fun prompt, but Anderson pointed out the massive elephant in the room here. OpenAI does not have a licensing deal with the Peanuts estate.
Yeah, they definitely don't.
So to a lot of creators, this looks exactly like IP theft at an industrial scale.
Now, looking impartially at how OpenAI defends this, Altman's perspective is that humanity requires an entirely new economic model for creative output.
A new economic model.
Yeah. Currently, their systems are programmed to refuse generating an image in the exact style of a specific named living artist.
Okay.
However, the system will gladly generate something based on a broader vibe or an art movement or a generic studio style.
Like saying, make it look like a 1950s comic strip instead of saying, make it look like Charles Schultz.
Exactly. It's a very fuzzy line between inspiration and replication. And the legal frameworks we inherited from the 20th century, they simply aren't equipped to handle an entity that has essentially viewed and learned from every single piece of art ever digitized.
It's just a totally different paradigm. And if you think that just affects illustrators and graphic designers, you need to look at what they are rolling out for all knowledge workers.
Oh, absolutely.
Altman teased some upcoming features like this enhanced memory function where ChatGPT basically learns about your preferences, your habits, and workflows over your entire lifetime.
So it acts less like a tool and more like an extension of your own brain.
Right. He also talked about AI being used to discover new science, specifically mentioning the hunt for room temperature superconductors. But, how does a language model discover physics?
Well, it doesn't do it by just reading Wikipedia and guessing.
Fair enough.
Advanced models are beginning to simulate molecular structures and predict material properties at these unprecedented speeds. They can run millions of permutations of atomic arrangements overnight.
Just testing them virtually?
Right, testing how electrons flow through different synthetic structures, which is something that would take a human lab decades of trial and error to physically synthesize and test.
That is incredible. But I do have to push back on another claim he made, though, because the most immediate disruption he discussed was what he called agentic software engineering.
Yes.
Anderson described human coders having religious-like moments because they are supposedly accomplishing 2 years of work in a single afternoon.
Which sounds completely absurd.
Right, like writing a little bit of code is one thing. But how does an AI do 2 years of actual software engineering? It's not just typing out isolated Python scripts.
You've hit on the exact difference between a conversational AI and an agentic AI.
Okay, break that down for me.
Conversational AI is like a GPS navigator. It tells you the route. It might even write out the turn-by-turn directions for you.
But I still have to put my hands on the wheel and drive the car.
Exactly. Agentic AI turns the steering wheel and hits the brakes for you.
Whoa.
In software engineering, an agent doesn't just output a block of code in a chat window. It actually spins up a development environment, writes the code, runs the test, reads the error log when it inevitably breaks, searches the documentation for a fix, rewrites the code, and then tests it again.
Just leaping over and over.
Thousands of times a minute, autonomously, until the software actually works.
Okay, which brings us right back to that restaurant booking tool Anderson tested on stage, the one they called Operator. Because he asked it to book a table, the AI asked for his credit card and then handled the whole booking process. But how does an agentic AI handle a local restaurant website that isn't built for machines?
That's the trick.
Because it's not always a clean API where computers just talk to computers behind the scenes, right? How does it actually click a button on a messy website?
Operator uses visual processing to literally look at the screen, exactly like a human does.
Seriously?
Seriously. It parses the pixels, it identifies the checkout button or the reservation time drop-down menu. Then it moves a digital cursor to those coordinates
Mm,
and inputs the data.
that is
It
wild.
navigates the human web. This is what makes it so powerful because it doesn't need a special back-end integration. It just acts as a surrogate human user.
Okay, but if AI is taking over those full workflows, like searching your CRM, drafting an email, hitting send, managing your calendar, and booking your flights, what happens to human agency?
That is the big question.
Right. If the AI is doing all the driving, do we become the masters of our digital lives, or are we just bystanders watching the machine do all the work?
That is the core tension of the agentic era. When you move from an oracle that just answers your questions to an agent that takes actions, the stakes change entirely.
Totally.
Handing over our credit cards and letting AI roam the internet freely forces us to look at where this is heading, which is artificial general intelligence and the existential safety risks that come with giving machines real autonomy.
Yeah, the term AGI gets thrown around constantly, but Altman joked that if you put 10 OpenAI researchers in a room and ask them to define AGI, you get 14 different definitions.
Which is very telling. That ambiguity exists because intelligence isn't a single switch you flip.
Mhm.
It's a vast spectrum.
Right.
However, Altman was very clear about why ChatGPT, at least in its current form, is not AGI.
Yeah.
And the main roadblock there is continuous learning.
Meaning, once ChatGPT finishes its massive, months-long training run, it's essentially frozen in time.
Precisely. A human can read a new book, realize their previous understanding of a topic was fundamentally wrong, and update their mental model dynamically.
Without forgetting everything else they already know.
Exactly. Current neural network architectures struggle immensely with that. If you try to teach an existing model new information continuously, it often suffers from what they call catastrophic forgetting.
Catastrophic forgetting. That sounds bad.
It is. It's where the new data inadvertently overwrites the carefully balanced mathematical weights of its foundational knowledge.
Oh, I see.
So until an AI can autonomously discover a weakness, research new science to update its understanding in real time, and execute any knowledge work a human can do without needing a massive centralized retraining run, it falls short of AGI.
But even without reaching AGI, the immediate risks are incredibly high. And OpenAI tracks this through their preparedness framework, focusing on massive threats like bioterrorism, severe cybersecurity vulnerabilities.
And the risk of a model learning to self-improve beyond our control.
Yeah, and the way they govern those risks is currently undergoing this massive, deeply scrutinized transformation. Because in the past, OpenAI's safety guardrails, especially concerning offensive content or what they term speech harms, those were largely decided by centralized groups of ethicists and executives sitting in a room.
A very small group of people.
Right. But recently, they've shifted their philosophy. They are pulling back some of those strict guardrails and relying more on the collective preference of their hundreds of millions of users to dictate what is acceptable behavior for the AI.
Which is a major shift.
Impartially speaking, it is a very controversial shift from centralized oversight to a form of market-driven morality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though,
Mm-hmm.
arguing over the exact definition of AGI is honestly a distraction.
Really? How so?
Because we are on an unstoppable exponential curve of capability. The immediate safety hurdle isn't some sci-fi apocalyptic scenario where the machines launch nukes tomorrow.
Okay, good to know.
It's an agentic AI making a high-stakes mistake. If an autonomous agent has access to your bank account or your company's proprietary database and it misinterprets a goal, it could delete critical data or execute a catastrophic financial trade in milliseconds.
Just instantly.
The capability of the model and the safety of the model are the exact same thing now. You simply won't deploy a highly capable agent if you don't implicitly trust its alignment to your goals.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because while the collective panic around AI safety feels completely unprecedented right now, Altman compared it to the early days of e-commerce.
That was a great analogy.
It really was. He shared this anecdote about how people used to be absolutely terrified to type their credit card numbers into a website. They assumed it was an instant guarantee of fraud and theft.
Which, to be fair, early on it was risky.
It was. But we didn't ban online shopping. We built SSL encryption. We built real-time anti-fraud algorithms. So the challenge now is whether we can build anti-rogue AI systems fast enough to keep up with the intelligence curve.
And if we are hurtling down this exponential curve, the most important variable might not actually be the architecture of the neural network.
No. What is it then?
It might be the human whose hands are resting on the steering wheel. Sam Altman himself.
Yes.
His motivations, the incredible power he wields, and the tension between open source ideals and the reality of a highly funded tech behemoth. Those are all central to this entire transition.
And the sheer gravity of his position was captured so perfectly during the interview because Anderson actually used OpenAI's $200 a month reasoning model, O1 Pro, and asked it to come up with the best question to ask his own CEO.
And it did not pull its punches.
It generated a heavy one. It asked, and I'm quoting here, "Given that you're helping create technology that could reshape the destiny of our entire species, who granted you the moral authority to do that, and how are you accountable if you're wrong?"
This raises an important question, and it directly mirrors the critiques Altman has faced from former allies, like Elon Musk. Now, just reporting on this impartially, Musk has publicly argued that Altman has been corrupted by the ring of power. And that critique is rooted in OpenAI's history.
Because they started as a nonprofit.
Exactly. It started as a completely open, nonprofit lab designed to act as a safeguard against giant tech monopolies.
Yeah.
But over time, it transitioned into a heavily capitalized, heavily guarded, for-profit entity.
I do wonder, though, how much of that is about power versus the cold, hard reality of the compute constraints we talked about earlier. Building these frontier models requires billions of dollars in servers.
And that is exactly the defense OpenAI presents. Their argument is that you simply cannot build safe, frontier-level AI on a nonprofit volunteer budget.
You need the big money.
You do. But the pressure on that closed, proprietary model is mounting from the outside. The open-source community is moving shockingly fast.
Like with DeepSeek.
Right. DeepSeek recently launched a highly capable open-source model that rivaled proprietary systems at a fraction of the cost.
So how did Altman respond to that?
Well, in response, Altman used this TED interview to announce that OpenAI will soon release a very powerful open-source model near the frontier to compete directly. They're trying to prevent intelligence from becoming fully commoditized by their rivals.
It's like we are watching an incredible real-time stress test of two very distinct narratives.
Yeah.
You have the brilliant visionary who achieved the impossible, and you have the leader who consolidated unimaginable influence over humanity's future. And yet, Altman claims his day-to-day life feels shockingly normal.
He described it as monotonous, didn't he?
He did. Imagine holding the keys to technology that could fundamentally reorder global economics, and your Tuesday morning still just feels like a regular Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
It really highlights how quickly humans can normalize literally anything.
We really do adapt to our environment no matter how extraordinary it is. But amidst all that talk of power scaling and trillion-dollar infrastructure, Altman shared a surprisingly grounded reflection. He brought up his co-founder, Ilya Sutskever, and quoted him as saying something along the lines of, "I don't know what the meaning of life is, but for sure it has something to do with babies."
Which is such a human thing to say.
It really is.
Right.
Altman reflected on how becoming a father didn't necessarily change his mission to build safe AI, but it deeply anchored it. It connects this massive, abstract technological race to a very biological, very human reality.
Well, we have covered a staggering amount of ground in this deep dive today. We started with the latent space breakthroughs required just to render 5 fingers on a hand.
Right.
And then we moved into the era of autonomous agents that can, visually navigate the internet, compile complex software, and book restaurants with your actual credit card.
We also explored the massive infrastructural demands of serving 500 million users and the technical hurdles of continuous learning that are standing in the way of AGI.
Not to mention the immense, almost incomprehensible responsibility resting on the few individuals who are steering this exponential capability curve.
With a lot to take in.
So, what does this all mean? To close out, I want to leave you with a story Altman shared at the very end of his TED appearance.
Oh, the iPad story. I loved this.
Yeah. He recalled watching a video years ago, right around the time the first iPad was released. And in the video, a toddler is sitting in a waiting room with a glossy paper magazine. The toddler puts their hand on the cover and tries to swipe it.
Just expecting it to be a screen.
Exactly. And when the image doesn't move, the toddler gets visibly frustrated and angry. Because to that child, who had already completely normalized touchscreens, a physical magazine was just a broken iPad.
It's such a powerful metaphor for the future. Altman views it as a hope that his children's generation will look back at our lives today, our limited pre-AGI lives, with a sense of pity almost. Yeah, because they will grow up in a world of absolute material abundance. A world where computers instantly understand and flawlessly execute their imaginations. A reality with basically zero friction between having an idea and seeing it realized in the physical world.
But here is the thought I want you to sit with as you go about your day. If a future generation is born into a world that instantly caters to their every single whim,
Right.
if they never have to encounter a broken iPad or, wrestle with an unsolvable problem or spend years frustrated while trying to master a difficult skill, what happens to human
That's
resilience?
the real question.
Does a world entirely stripped of friction create a flawless utopia, or does it quietly rob us of the very struggles that build our character? Something to think about.